Hi folks, it's Andy and welcome to today's Kendo Rant. In contrast to yesterday, I've got tons of questions to get through today. So thank you very much for leaving all those comments with all those questions on them. I'll do my best to get through them as quickly as I can. So this might be a little bit of a longer episode than normal, but I do want to get through these questions because we've got some great ones. Okay, so kicking off from the top. Hi Andy, thank you very much for the videos. Thank you, I'm glad you're enjoying them. I used to practice kendo a while ago in Japan, but then stopped when I left to my home country. I started practicing again in a different country in a very traditional kendo club, which is amazing with the exception of one thing. I have a couple of tattoos that are not visible under the gi, and I've been worried that I'll be judged negatively if one of the Japanese sensei ever sees them. Do you know any other kendokas with tattoos in Japan or abroad? Okay, so this is because in Japan, tattoos are considered somewhat taboo still. They've got quite sort of strong connotations with organised crime, the Yakuza and stuff like that. Not that everyone in Japan that has a tattoo is a member of the Yakuza. That isn't the case at all. Certainly, regular law-abiding citizens do have some of them have tattoos as well, but not as many as in the West. No, I don't know any Japanese kendoka with tattoos. Actually, I don't know any, but I don't know many Japanese people with tattoos. Just one or two. But that's a cultural thing of sort of Japanese society. Of course, I know loads of non-Japanese kendoka that have tattoos. Yeah, plenty of them. Because frankly, they're not stigmatized in the same way. Certainly in Europe or in the USA, I think. For example, I'm just thinking of places where I've done kendo, but I know people that have got quite a lot of tattoos. And even when they go to visit Japan, they might have a lot of tattoos. And Japanese people are aware that outside of Japan, tattoos aren't considered as negatively as they are in Japan by Japanese people. So they're quite I'd say they're not completely, but reasonably accepting of foreign people with tattoos. You probably heard that, like, in Japan you can't go to some like onsen, which is like a public spa. You can't go to some of those if you have tattoos, and that's just a blanket rule. So yeah, I mean, if you're a foreign person going to Japan and you've got tattoos and you can't go to the onsen because they have a rule against them, I mean that's going to apply to you like it does anyone else. But like, as a tourist or as a kendoka, no, I can't think of a case where I've seen somebody being negatively viewed or attacked for having, not attacked of course, but kind of thought of negatively necessarily because they've got tattoos. They're generally forgiven because they understand that there's cultural differences. So my thoughts is if you're practicing now outside of Japan, in a country where tattoos are somewhat more acceptable, then I don't think that you should have to worry about hiding them, frankly. And I don't think that the Japanese sensei there would really have a problem with you having tattoos. It's not really any of his business, to be honest. As much as I think kendo has got an impact on everything in everyday life, I don't think that it's his place to be upset with you in a country where tattoos are acceptable for you to have tattoos. So I'm sure he wouldn't. I'm not saying he would be upset about it or feel that it's judged negatively. If he's living abroad, I'm sure he's aware that it's a normal thing in the country that you're in. So yeah, I don't think that you should have to worry about it as much as you are. Okay, so I hope that helps. Next one. I had a question for you regarding the term kendo. I read in Alex Bennett Sensei's translation of A Bilingual Guide to the History of Kendo. The term kendo stems from Yagyu Munenori's philosophy of Katsujinken versus Setsuninto from the Heiho Kadensho. I'm assuming I'm reading that right. Apologies if not. I'm not super clued up on this topic, I can tell you now. Can you elaborate on the significance of To versus Ken in this context? On a side note, I interpret meaning To/katana as a single-edged curved sword that can cut in one direction, whereas the Ken/tsurugi is a double-edged sword to strike and reflect, so to speak. Okay, so, right. This is a super deep question, and I'm not sure if I have the sort of knowledge to properly answer this. This is a better question for Bennett Sensei, frankly. But anyway, I'll do my best. And next time I speak to Bennett Sensei, I'll certainly be happy to ask him about it. I haven't spoken to him in a while though. But right. So Katsujinken is the idea is the life-giving sword. So the katsu is like kind of it's from the term like seikatsu, which means your kind of everyday life. It means life. Katsu itself actually means life. And jin is person, and ken is sword. So it literally means the life-giving sword. And setsunin to is it means it can actually be read in another way using the word ken instead of to, but setsu means kill, and nin is the same as jin, it means person, and to in this case also means sword. But there's another way of saying that. It's often referred in context with, instead of setsunin to, as satsujinken. So katsujinken and satsujinken is often said as well, which obviously uses the same kanji for sword. So you're talking about two words for sword. There's there's lots of words for lots of things, but there's two words here that both mean sword. One is to, as in setsunin to, which is also read as katana. That specifically refers to not a Japanese sword, but a single-edged sword. And yeah, I mean, it kind of really means a katana. And the other one, Satsujinken, Katsujinken, is the word ken, which is the ken from kendo, which literally is also read as tsurugi, as you state, which is it just means sword. It's literally the word for sword. It can be any kind of sword. Usually it's often used to mean double-edged swords, but it doesn't have to mean a double-edged sword, which is why we use it in the term kendo and kenjutsu, because you don't, So personally, I feel like I understand what you're saying, whereas the word to is like a single-edged sword, so there's only one direction, whereas ken and tsurugi, is a kind of double-edged sword, so it's strike and reflect kind of thing. But I kind of feel like you might be going into it in a little bit more detail than it's meant to be. But I don't know enough about it to definitely say. I'm no philosopher and I'm no historian on this area. But just going off, I know that they also use the word satsujinken instead of setsunin to. So I think it's kind of interchangeable in that respect. And I don't think that ken specifically means a double-edged sword either. It's usually used to refer, like if there's a double-edged sword, like a Western-style sword, or even a Chinese-style one of those thin swords. Don't know how much about it, but you see like in Tai Chi and stuff. I've seen them in the movies, that's why I know. That would be called ken. It wouldn't be referred to as a to or katana because it has two edges. But also a katana or a nihonto or a single-edged sword can also be called a ken. Hence, we use the word ken in kendo. Yeah. So yeah, I think you might be going a little bit further than probably needs to, but I could well be wrong. All right. So I'm happy to sort of concede if I'm wrong on that. Okay. Right. A question for Kendo Rant. Great. Is it possible or would you recommend shaving the grips of standard Shinai to make it koban? I find it rather difficult to find a koto-style Shinai with koban grip. I suppose it's the closest you can get in terms of Shinai to a real sword. Is it possible to modify it and it would make my life a lot easier? Yeah, it's perfectly possible to do it. I mean, we can even do it for you at KendoStar. If there's a particular Shinai that you like on our website, some of the models, depends on the model, we can make them koban, or you can do it yourself. Yeah, I mean, if you kind of, I'm not much of a handyman, so I'm not really good at that sort of thing. But you could sort of shave it down or sand it. It's perfectly fine. The only thing I'd be careful of is taking too much weight out of it, because then if you plan to use it in a tournament or something, it could fail the weight regulations. But no, it's a perfectly acceptable thing to do, and I do know of people that have done it. So yeah, if you want to do it, go right ahead. Hi Andy, I love your show, thank you very much. Just a simple question, and I hope you can answer it. I'm interested in kendo lately, especially after watching your channel. But I'm 28 already, and with no kendo experience, am I too old to start? No, you're absolutely not too old to start. It's a perfect time for you to start. Get down to the dojo, okay? 28 is actually much earlier than most people start outside of Japan. Most people start in the mid-30s to 40s, so I definitely wouldn't worry about getting into it. I actually know of several people that started in their 30s, and actually went on to achieve the 7th dan. So it's not like even it's going to mean that you can't progress, because you absolutely can. It's all down to yourself, how much you put into it and how much you want to improve. But at 28, you're definitely not too old, and it's not too late for you to start, all right? So I definitely would encourage you to get into kendo, because it's absolutely brilliant. I'm sure you'll love it. At least I hope you do. It's probably going to be different to what you may be expecting, but I'm hoping that my channel might be a bit of an insight as to how kendo is. But yeah, I would definitely encourage you to get down the dojo and get started in kendo. I have a question. I'd be flattered if you could take time to answer it. Since the beginning, when we start to do keiko and shiai, we, at least the ones who see kendo as budo and not mere sport, are taught to not perform sampo mamori or engage in tsuba-zeriali if not necessary, and never do it with both hands up in the head height, which would show you are a novice kenshi with still an ugly and rough kendo. Plus it opens as ski for do and whatever. So why do we see so many high-level kenshi, even from Japan, doing these kind of things? Sometimes the guys are senpo and it's just to start the shiai both in sampo mamori and then go to tsuba-zeriali. I've seen AJKC from the 90s, and they don't use this kind of excessive sampo mamori and tsuba-zeriali. Looks like kendo has changed, not in a good way, thanks. Okay, so sampo mamori is when you hold the shinai and block in this kind of position and block it's called a 3-point block. Okay, so you're blocking your kote, you're blocking your men, you're blocking your do. Okay, right. Here's how I want to address this, right? I'm going to kick up controversy here, right? It's not wrong to do sampo mamori. It's not wrong. It's acceptable to do it, right? It's just a bad strategy, right? It's not wrong, yeah? Same, it's not wrong to do tsuba-zeriali. Tsuba-zeriali is a perfectly valid strategy in kendo. Right. I think, you know, of course it's not very nice to see people stood here all the time like this. There's a difference between sampo mamori and using this as a stance, all right? But still, I don't consider it like wrong, right? It's a lower level thing to do, yeah. And that's why you see it a lot in Japanese high school shiai, particularly. You don't see it that much in the All Japans even now. You might see it momentarily, but probably not that much different. I actually, after reading this, I had a quick look and I went back to like a All Japan Championships final from like the late 80s or early 90s, I can't remember. It was when like Miyazaki Sensei was still in it, and those guys were still doing it. Those guys were still doing it, probably, you know, a similar amount as they are now. But they don't do it that much because it's not a super effective strategy. Yeah, I've got a video about it actually called How to Beat a Blocker. So if you search the channel, I'll teach you how to beat people that do that a lot. It's not so hard to beat someone that does that all the time. In shiai, right, the goal is to win and not to lose. That's what shiai is about. And that's why you have to do your best not to lose. So sometimes you have to do that. I do that sometimes in the shiai so that I can't be beaten when I'm in a weak position and I've been caught mentally off guard or something like that. It's the weakness of my kendo coming out. Of course, the perfect thing is that I'd always be ready and always be in control of the match, but I'm not good enough to do that, like most people aren't. So unless there's a huge difference between the skill level of the opponent, of the competitors, you're always going to see this sort of thing because it's important that people put emphasis on victory in shiai and the emphasis on the concept of shobu, victory and loss, in the shiai situation in order for shiai to do its job in the overall big picture of kendo. Yeah, I'd get out of the thought of saying that it's wrong to do or never do sampo Mamori. I'm not saying you should do it. Let me clear that up. I'm not saying you should do it. What I'm saying is it's not like wrong to do it. It's just a bad strategy, okay? And it has a weakness. It's the weakness in your kendo coming out, and everybody has weakness. So it's not, you know, I think it's better to look at it from that point of view, as opposed to saying, well, it's just ugly, because that's kind of a brush off response. Do you know what I mean? It's better to kind of look at it as a weakness in someone's kendo coming out, and then it's whether you can, if it's your opponent that's doing that, for example, whether that weakness can be properly capitalized on. All right? Okay, next one. Basically, I made a comment on one of your rants about kendo and swordsmanship, and I mentioned about you doing a video of advanced tsuba-zeriali. Basically, I just want to add that if you would include the safest ways to get in and out of tsuba-zeriali, when is it best to and when is it best to defend against hikiwaza strikes, and I'm a bit confused whether you should apply pressure or be relaxed on the hands when you're in the hiki strike distance. I know when you watch Shinai, some kendoka push your hands diagonally as they move to the side and make a strike. How do you prevent things like that? I know I'm going to ask my fellow kendoka next session, because I'm starting to get a feel of things that I'm still a little unsure of hikiwaza tsuba-zeriali, because it seems very fickle, and though you can get struck easily, even though I'm relaxed, I really don't know. But yeah, if you ever can get the time to do an in-depth video on it, I think I've cleared that now. Thank you so much again, as always. Okay, great. Okay, so it's quite a deep topic. I would like to go into more detail with that in a kind of instructional video, but all right, right. The safest ways to get in and out of tsuba-zeriali is like, you don't want to try to get into tsuba-zeriali, all right? You end up in tsuba-zeriali after something's happened and nothing's come of it. So no yuko datotsu has been made, but it's not good to intentionally from the start try to get into tsuba-zeriali. So forget that first off, right? But getting into tsuba-zeriali isn't a problem, right? Now the safest way to get out of tsuba-zeriali is to make a valid hikiwaza. And here's what my sensei told me, right? One of my senseis in Japan, I was really weak at hikiwaza for the first, say, 3 years that I was in Japan. And it wasn't until I moved to a more competitive area that I learned more about it, and I realized that it was such an important element of my kendo that was missing. And what the teacher said to me is, he said, look, he said, this is what his teacher said to him. He said, do you know how you become, what's the best, he said, what's the best defense of kind of against hikiwaza? I said, no, what is it? He said, you have to be the one that's going to hit. Yeah. He said, instead of being the one that's going to be hit, you have to be the one that's going to hit. So what that means is you have to be good at hikiwaza, and then good at creating the opportunities for hikiwaza, and then you'll be able to apply seme at tsuba-zeriali, which in itself is an excellent defense, and it helps you keep control of the situation at tsuba-zeriali. You should, your general tsuba-zeriali distance shouldn't be that much different from your striking distance. You should be able to strike pretty much from any point at tsuba-zeriali. And how relaxed or tense you are, I mean, in general, it should be the same as when you're in chudan. You should be as relaxed as possible. But the situation really depends on the actions of your opponent. So you have to really figure that out through practice. Use some of the techniques in the video that you put the comment on, which is the one about tsuba-zeriali and hikiwaza. And then you have to kind of extrapolate on that a little bit yourself and kind of get to grips with how your opponents tend to react to your movements. Okay? It's a difficult topic. I would like to make more videos about it in the future, and I'll do my best to. Okay, next one. So this is on the comment from the last video I did, which was about 2 types of jigeiko, gokaku geiko and hikitate geiko. And this says, I'm often confused how to use different terms and what type of keiko they entail. Uchikomi geiko versus kakari geiko. I've heard anything ranging from 1, a set pattern of hitting as quickly as possible. Example, men, kote men, men hiki men, kote men, hikido, men. 2, Motodachi opens at their own discretion, whatever they want. Kakarite strikes openings as quickly as possible. 3, Kakarite creates openings by striking the Shinai, gaining center. Motodachi doesn't strike. 4, Kakarite creates opening by striking Shinai, baiting by striking, creating additional opportunities for Ojiwaza. Motodachi also strikes. And also Jigeiko versus Mawari Geiko. I've heard people say Jigeiko is not time keiko, but where Motodachi decides when to stop. When we line up to do Jigeiko with a sensei. But I've also heard people use it for when we're timing Jigeiko. But have also heard the later called as Mawari Geiko, though I thought that was just rotating. Would you be able to help clarify these terms? Many thanks. Appreciate your answer. Okay, great. Right. First off, I'll talk about Kakari Geiko versus Uchikomi in a minute. But here's the thing, right? Here's what we do outside of Japan is we tend to like we kind of put too much into the terminology. So what you've got to remember is these words, right, for us outside of Japan, they're terminology. However, right, in Japan, they're not terminology, they're language. It's a living kind of thing, right? So one person interprets a term as one thing and another person interprets it as something totally different. So some things are generally the same, of course, everywhere. Kirikaishi is generally the same thing. Meuchi is generally the same thing. But then there's other things like some people call the standard what we might call tobikomido, where an opponent puts their hands up and you hit do and go past. Some people call that nukido, yeah, because you nuku. Nuku means to go past, go through, yeah. Some people call men nukido. Where the opponent attacks men and you kind of dodge and hit do at the same time. Some people would call that kaishido, even though you don't do the kaisu, the actual, block and strike, because it's a waza against the do. Some people call kote suriage men, kote kaishi men, or kote oji men. There's also, because it's a language. Yeah, so they don't think of it as specific terms, right? So there's always going to be variants depending on your dojo and your teachers and the people that you're practicing with. So you have to confirm these things with those people, all right? Because it's always going to vary in very small ways, right? So going on to what your specific questions about Uchikomi and Kakari. And I mean, Uchikomi Geiko is a perfect example, right? Uchikomi Geiko is interpreted differently throughout the world, right? For the most part, people think of it as like a set time where you do repetitive strikes while the Motodachi shows openings. But sometimes it might be, in some areas, I've been in practices in Japan where they've been like, okay, we're going to do Uchikomi and we're going to do 5 times men each. And it's like just a 5 times men practice. They call that Uchikomi or Uchikomi Geiko because they're Uchikonderu is the kind of, that's... It works, sometimes that happens. But let's clarify it a bit, okay? So here's the book, the AJKF grading book. And in the third down section, there is actually a question, an example question that says, explain the difference between Uchikomi Geiko and Kakari Geiko. All right, so let's read that and then you can go with that. All right, it says Uchikomi Geiko is when the person doing the hitting strikes at targets presented by the Motodachi. And they do the correct striking and do their best to improve their technique. That's all it says, all right? That's all it says, right? It doesn't necessarily say that you could do it in a pattern or you could do it free so the opponent shows the techniques. Anything that fits that description is Uchikomi Geiko according to this. And Kakari Geiko is when the attacker with full spirit tries to defeat the aite with seme and create the opportunities for striking, and in a short time use as much of their spirit and physical energy use it as much as it up as possible, and repetitively strike. Okay, so that's what counts as kakari geiko. All right, that's the only definition that we've got in here. Okay, so like I said, it can vary from dojo to dojo. Sometimes it's, you know, but it does say there that for kakari geiko, the motodachi, sorry, the kakarite, the attacking side, creates the opportunities through seme and creating the striking chances. In terms of jigeko versus mawari geiko, jigeko means generally it just means the free practice, like the sparring practice. It's different to jiu geiko. Jiu geiko means free practice in a different way. Jiu means like free, but jiu geiko tends to be like sometimes also called like monshiawase geiko or something like that, where you would talk with your opponent. Oh, I'd like to practice this. Okay, and then you practice say 5 times men, and then he says, okay, I'd like to practice kote men or something like that. That's different. Jigeiko is written in a different way, and it means any kind of sparring practice. All right. Generally, jigeko is done in the format that you described, where Motodachi stands on one side of the dojo and the other people come and line up and practice with them. Sometimes it's timed, sometimes it's up to the Motodachi to decide the time. Both of those are acceptable, and both of those are jigeko. Mawari geiko is a way of practicing jigeko. This is my interpretation anyway. Some people might think of it differently, but basically, mawari geiko is where you, I mean, this is another thing in Japan. Lots of people don't even say jigeko; they just say keiko. They just say keiko. So, but basically, it's a way of doing the free sparring. Mawari geiko is a way of doing free sparring, where everybody makes partners and then you move around as a group, okay, like you would with kirikaishi or uchikomi or anything like that. That's mawari geiko. Okay, so mawari means to move around. Okay, so that's what mawari geiko is. Okay, so I hope that makes sense. I'm still getting through these questions. It's going to be a longer episode today. Hope you're not getting bored. For the past year, I've been using a Franken Shinai. I put together with 4 staves from different Shinai after the rest started to get too damaged to be safe to use anymore. So far, it hasn't had any issues with splintering, cracking, or any real damage, but I'm curious if there's recommended shelf life or inherent danger to using a particular Shinai or Shinai parts for too long. Not really. It's quite a common practice. Just make sure that there's no splinters or cracks in any of the staves. You will find that Franken Shinai tend not to. Franken Shinai is a Shinai that's made of bits of old Shinai. They tend not to last very long because the bamboo doesn't work sort of well with other staves. But yeah, I mean, it's not a super problem for doing it. Just keep using it until you break it, just like you would any other Shinai. But yeah, just make sure you are keeping an eye on it for those splinters and the cracks, because obviously other staves of that Shinai that it's originally from are broken, so it's obviously sort of, you know, on its way. Not a purely kendo related question, but I thought if I'd ask anyway, I'll do my best to answer. But I'm an expert in not very much, so I'll do my best. I recently saw and was invited to join a new Facebook page regarding the creation of an All-Japan Sodo Federation, which would focus on modernising the way of the spear. I was wondering if you knew or had any ideas to why this didn't happen sooner. It would seem to make sense to have the yari included in modern budo alongside the sword and naginata. Outside koryu, such as I don't know how you read that, Hozoin-ryu, and Sodo and Sojutsu seem to fall behind in terms of widespread practice. Yeah, I don't know why. I don't know why it hasn't been modernised sooner or brought into other budo sooner. I just don't know. I'm sure there's a reason. Probably that it's just not as widely practiced. I think a lot of Sojutsu was probably amalgamated into jukendo, I feel like. But I could be wrong about that. I think it's just a popularity thing, just not a super popular practice, to be honest. I feel like probably even back in the day, sort of Sojutsu like probably wasn't as popular as Kenjutsu. Because I think people that probably could afford kind of fighting lessons, martial arts lessons, were probably people of a sort of higher status that were sword carriers and would want to know how to learn. There was kind of an ability to being able to use a sword. So yeah, I don't know. Okay, cool. Now that you've spoken about types of jigeko, could you shed some light on types of kakarigeiko? That is, what is the task of Motodachi is, especially in ai-kakarigeiko. How should one approach doing kakarigeiko with new students? Okay, so it's a little bit similar to the question I just answered, but basically, Motodachi should provide the strong spirit, and they should gauge the level of their opponent when they're receiving kakarigeiko. Okay, so they should, if we go by the definition just before of where the Motodachi doesn't necessarily provide the openings, they just kind of provide the good kamae, but they don't necessarily have to block everything. There is another type of kakarigeiko where the Motodachi tries to block everything, and you still have to try, and you have to kind of judge with your opponent. They can kind of kill some of the waza to kind of encourage them to do more, but they have to be mindful of the part of the kakarite. Okay. In terms of ai-kakarigeiko, it's a bit different. Essentially, ai-kakarigeiko is when you both do kakarigeiko together. There is no Motodachi in this situation, so both are attacking kakarigeiko at the same time. Okay, so there is no consideration as Motodachi because there is no Motodachi. And how to approach kakarigeiko with new students is, with newer students, I tend to not do strict kakarigeiko. I tend to, with newer students, I would make them do a kind of uchikomi in a kakarigeiko style, and at the very start I tend to give them a pattern as well. So instead of the Motodachi deciding the attacks, I tell them a pattern to follow, so that they can get into the rhythm of attacking continuously. And again, it's just about being considerate whilst also encouraging, so that they can be positive and making continuous attacks. Two left. I have a question. How would you prepare for the World Kendo Championships or any other high-level competition? What would your training be like, and what would you do specifically? Right. Well, this is an interesting one. So, how would I prepare for the World Championships? Well, it really depends on the situation of the person. All right. So, it depends on what country you're in and what what your situation is. When I prepared for the last World Championships that I was in, not the one that just happened because I wasn't in that one, but the 16th one that was in Tokyo, I practiced pretty much 4 or 5 times a week. But I was very lucky because I was in a situation where I was able to do that. I had access to a private dojo and people that were willing to train with me, and I would go in. I'd go to the dojo very early in the morning, maybe just before 7 o'clock. I would start work at 9 o'clock. So from 7 o'clock until 8 o'clock, I would have 1 hour keiko. Sometimes just with one other person who would be there to help me. And just do the practice in the morning, have a shower, get changed, go into work, and then maybe a couple of times. I do that maybe 2 or 3 times a week, not every day, just 2 or 3 times a week. Bearing in mind at the time I was like 32 or something, so like I wasn't really young, so even then I was feeling the effects of that sort of training. I would then also practice in the evenings, maybe a couple of times a week with the company I worked at, and like once or twice a week with the dojo that my daughter attended. And I would also try as well, and I'd go to the gym like 2 or 3 times a week as well, just to try and avoid injury if nothing else, keep my fitness up. I do all that, and then that's what I really did. Now, if I was to do that, I don't think I could do the same again, especially now I live in the UK at the moment, so I can't practice every day. I'd probably up my practice schedule though to probably 3 or 4 times a week, and the times that I wasn't practicing, I would be going to the gym. I'd certainly be going to the gym every day. and I'd probably be doing Suburi at home. I'd be doing a lot of mitori keiko and making sure that I'm following the sort of my own kendo blueprint that I've made from watching the kendo players that I admire and want to emulate, and make sure that that's always in my mind. That's essentially what I would be focusing on. Okay, so yeah. Last one. This one's from the Kendo Show Early Access Facebook group. If you're not in the group, get in the group. There's a link in the description. It says, tight shoulders are the bane of my existence. Any tips? What has worked for you? Right. This is something that everybody struggles with, is having sort of tightness and tension in the shoulders. It's easy to say, oh, you just got to relax, just relax, just relax. But it's not so easy to do. I struggled with it as well. Still do struggle with it sometimes. The biggest thing for me, and this is the thing, is it's a bit of a tough one, because I think for me it was a trial by fire. I had to burn through it, and it was several years ago now, when I went to practice with some high school students, some very, very high level high school students, #1 team in Japan actually, and I was joining the student practice, even though I was much older than the kids. But I wanted to. This is part of my training for the World Championships actually. But before that, this was like when I was training from the Worlds in Brazil or something. And I remember we just did an hour of kirikaishi, and it was really tough. It was really, really tough. It wasn't normal kirikaishi either. It was I think it was 30 or 40 kirikaishi. So you did men, tayatari, and then you did 30 or 40 times sayu men. And it was just an hour of that. And it was horrible. It was hell. It was painful. And I felt my fingers going numb as I was trying to swing the Shinai like this. And there was tears running down my face. I was crying because I just wanted to stop. I didn't want to carry on, but I couldn't, because I couldn't stop. Had to get through it. And yeah, finally when Sensei said, okay, you can stop, you can all stop now, I said, oh, thank God we can stop, right? And they said, okay, now everybody does 5 times big men, just keep doing that until I tell you to stop. Oh, no. But then suddenly I was able, because I had no power left in my body to put tension in my shoulders, it forced me to relax, and I was able to make the best men cuts that I did in my life up to that point. So I'd kind of been pushed through my limits, so that I didn't have the option of putting tension in my shoulders. Now it's really hard for us to do that without the right environment, but that's really the best thing for it. Kirikaishi, uchikomi, kakari keiko, do as much of that as you can, and other than that, it's just practice, and you will get better at it. I'm sure. I'm absolutely sure. Okay, so that's the end of the questions. Like I said, nice long video today. A bit longer than normal. I hope you enjoyed it though. I hope you found the questions useful. Don't forget to leave me a comment. Let me know what you'd like me to talk about next time. Like, share, subscribe, all that stuff. Join the Kendo Show Early Access group, because that's where I'll be posting new episodes of the instructional videos, as well as where you can post questions and we can chat and stuff like that, which is really cool. And most importantly, don't forget to shop at KendoStar, KendoStar.com. It's that's the equipment website that I run that basically allows me to bring these videos to you. It's obviously top quality equipment, all designed, curated by myself. You won't regret shopping at KendoStar, nobody does. It's a really, really great website, if I do say so myself. I think the price is all right, but the quality is top notch. I think we're the best at what we do. And if you try us out, I'm sure you'll agree. So that's KendoStar.com. Thanks a lot for watching, everyone, and I'll see you all next time.